Hello, welcome back to the United Masterclass. I'm Haider Rubbani, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Kieran Maguire. You guys all know him. He was here a couple of years ago now during COVID, and we spoke about Manchester United's finances. And I felt it was really important to have him on again to talk about the financial situation, or should we say financial crisis at Manchester United. There's a lot going on off the pitch. There's a lot of unhappy fans. It feels like maybe the tide is turning. So no one better to talk to me today than Kieran. Kieran, welcome back. What's going on in the Manchester United world? Let's go straight into it because there's a lot to talk about and we've got very little time.
Well, Manchester United still has cash in the bank, but it also owes a huge sum of money to both the lenders who the Glazers utilised to go through their leverage buyout of the club in 2005, and that debt's not been repaid. The club also has an overdraft facility, which it dips into as and when needed, and that's not unusual in its own right. The share price of Manchester United, I think it's fair to say it's been modest. I think it's the politest way I can describe it. It was down around about 15-17% below the launch price of 2012 when the Glazers brought Manchester United to the market. And despite what the club says otherwise, I think most investors would say that that's a weak return on a company which the people involved want it to be positioned as an entertainment stroke tech stock. And it seems to be certainly underperforming if you compare it to similar companies in those industries. So the finances are not great, but that doesn't necessarily impact upon the club. The wage bill is going to be pretty high for 2022. It won't be so high for 22-23 because Manchester United do very much incentivise the wage structure at the club with regards to qualification for the Champions League, because Champions League qualification worth a minimum of 40 million, but for a club like United, I think expectations of getting into the knockout phase. You've then got the match day receipts from Old Trafford itself, which are minimum of 4 million, perhaps 5 million a match. Realistically, you're probably looking at 70 to 80 million for a half decent year. There's no reason why it can't be well over 100 million in a good year in the Champions League. And so United effectively hedge against that through their wage structure by having penalties for non-qualification in the Champions League.
Thanks for that, Kieran. I do want to ask, because last time you came on, this was during COVID. We spoke about the impact of COVID, not having that, not having some of that revenue, match day revenue. Although season tickets were bought, weren't they? So, am I correct in saying that during COVID and Project Restart, were the fans refunded their tickets, the season tickets? Is that how it worked?
Yeah, effectively it rolled over until 21-22, and I think the club. It's easy to bash the Glazers. The Glazers not the only people at Manchester United. Some of the stuff that the club did during lockdown was absolutely fantastic in supporting the local community. And also, I think the club was very fair in those matches which were initially postponed. Refunds were given and so on. The way that the club utilised its resources to help provide services for the local community during lockdown were excellent. But we're now out of COVID effectively. And I think the focus of attention is going on in terms of the quality of management decisions. And I'm not a Manchester United fan myself. Let's put the cards on the table. But if I was a Manchester United fan, I wouldn't be happy.
Kieran, I am not happy at all, and I know that a lot of the fan base are not happy. But we do want to try and speak with facts, don't we, rather than emotions. So when we talk about, so last time we came on, we spoke about the cash reserves. So we had the overdraft. We know about the overdraft. We had the cash reserves, I believe. So correct me if I'm wrong. That's why you're here. 350 million, and there's a lot of things, a lot of reports saying that, that's maybe down to 50 million. When we last spoke, we spoke about Harry Maguire's transfer and Wan-Bissaka's, and I think a lot of people sometimes talk about net spend a lot, and I don't like to talk about that. I don't think it's a fair way of looking at how a club spends. You amortize the value of the transfer fee, don't you, across the number of years of the contract. But United paid 80 million up front, I believe, for Harry Maguire. Wan-Bissaka was in 25 million chunks over 2 years. So that's a huge outlay. Then we bought Bruno Fernandes as well. So is it fair to say that the fact that United have missed out on the Champions League as well, the Glazers don't invest their own money? We do know that. We do know that a considerable amount has gone out in terms of interest. We know the dividends as well has gone out. So there's been no money really put in, no loans, let's say interest-free loans like Chelsea did with Roman Abramovich. So is it fair to say that, because of this lack of investment, that United actually don't have a lot of, let's say, liquidity or cash to spend during this transfer window?
It is a complex issue. Manchester United is very good at generating cash. It's still an attractive brand to sponsors. Merchandise sales are still excellent. From what we've seen at the first couple of matches, there doesn't appear to have been much movement in respect of those people who were saying let's hit the Glazers in the pocket by boycotting Adidas shirts. Certainly from what I've seen on television in the first two matches, the new kits appear to be selling well. So the cash is coming in. Manchester United will also have received the first instalment from Sky in respect of the TV broadcast monies for this season. They will have got a substantial amount of money from Team Viewer and some of the other sponsors as well. So I don't see the cash position as being terrible. I think where Manchester United underperform compared to other clubs who you would expect you'd effectively say is their peer group is that they do spend money on transfers. It's based on my figures since Sir Alex retired. I've got figures here of around about 1.55 billion has been spent on players. They don't sell players. They don't sell players at high prices. Chelsea have made around about 400 to 500 million pounds over the course of the last decade from player sales. We've seen during the current window and the January window that there's another club in Manchester. Can't remember their name, but they've sold Ferran Torres, they've sold Jesus, they've sold other players as well.
Yeah, Zinchenko's another one.
Yeah. And what City have also started doing, and I think this is perhaps a bit more of a concern. Manchester City have now reached into that position as far as their academy is concerned, where they are selling players for 5, 8, 10 million who have never played for Manchester City, and that turns out to be a really lucrative form of income. They've sold a couple to Southampton. I think they've sold one to Leeds. And when your academy starts to generate a cash return, that's really useful. Chelsea are very similar. We're not seeing the same from Manchester United. So again, it's not the money being spent; it's the fact that they're not generating enough money from a broader range of sources as possible, which for me is slightly more disappointing.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point. A lot of that is probably to do with the large wages as well. You can't get Phil Jones off the books. Dean Henderson, who was a second choice keeper, now I know he's on loan now, 120 grand a week. You look at David De Gea, close to 400. Ronaldo, 500. That's nearly $1 million itself. And those players, you looked at Cavani, 250k. Pogba was north of 250k. They're spending more than the top teams. I'm saying the two top teams, Liverpool and City, and their wage bill isn't as much as United. So it's a great point. Kieran, I want to talk now about a lot of chat now that the Glazers could be looking to go out. From my point of view as a fan, I'm not an expert like you, but I'm sitting here and watching. There's a lot of bad press around the Glazers. We know about that. They've made a considerable amount of money from Manchester United. In some ways, they played an absolute blind. I always say this to people: to leverage buy out the club and then maybe sell for 4.5 billion plus. It's crazy. The club's actually been paying the interest, even though the interest and the debt was put on by the Glazers with leverage buyout. Do you think that the fact they're not maybe spending as much now, because it does seem like that every new manager's had about 130 million to spend, and you've got Eric Ten Hag here, and it's the squad needs a lot of work. Do you think that they'd be tempted to sell now in the next maybe 2 years, and what price would make them sit up and take notice?
Well, the current Manchester United share price as we talk is $12.78. Manchester United listed on the New York Stock Exchange in August 2012 at $14 a share. So that's a pretty dreadful return over a decade, regardless of how the club choose to dress that up. Certainly, the Glazers would not be interested in selling at anywhere near the present share price. They are firmly of the belief that the club is significantly undervalued by the markets, that there is a lot of opportunity to generate additional monies now, whether that's going to be from streaming, where United have some control over those sales, whether that's going to be through fan tokens. We don't know whether it's going to be through the expansion of the stadium. But the expansion of the stadium always has a ceiling. But they certainly believe that Manchester United isn't appreciated by the markets. The share price was higher than $20 less than a year ago. So we have seen quite a substantial reduction. So what is it going to do to take somebody to persuade the Glazers to sell? Everything has a price. And so to say that it's not for sale or they would not consider any offers is nonsense. But from the perspective of a buyer, you've got to say, well, first of all, we're going to have to pay. In my view, when you look to buy the club, you also acquire the debt. So we've got that 600-700 million of debt on top of the shares. I don't think you're going to get much change out of 5 billion for Manchester United. Could easily be higher than that by the time you factor in the prospects. Then there's got to be a significant investment on the pitch, and then there's the fact that the roof's leaking, and the facilities are
subpar. They're awful, yeah. Kieran. Yeah, I said 500 million on the stadium. Yeah. I said maybe more. Maybe let's say 700 million on the new or invest in the stadium, off the pitch.Maybe in terms of the training ground, maybe another 200-300 million in the team as well. Another 250-300 million. Just over a billion. Whoever comes in will have to spend that.
Well, I think it's certainly a substantial investment is required. Now, that could take place over a period of time. People say, well, Manchester United have already got debt, so can they borrow again? Simple answer to that is yes. We've seen Spurs borrow. And what Spurs have done, and also what the Glazers have done, is that they've effectively taken out interest-only loans. Now, Spurs are paying probably around about £25 million a year in interest on the loans that they've taken out. They are generating an extra 70 to 80 million through the switch to the new stadium. So borrowing's not a problem. Debt and interest themselves are not problems, provided you're getting a return on what you're doing. I think the perception amongst some in the world of finance is that return is not being generated. When you look at any business, what's the difference between a successful business and an unsuccessful business? Because for every Facebook, there's a MySpace. For every Apple, there's a Nokia, and so on. It comes down to two things. First of all, opportunities. The opportunities at Manchester United are limitless in the sense that they are a football club with a global fan base, with commercial partners who want to be associated with a successful Manchester United, and they've got history, heritage. They sell newspapers. Manchester United are box office. So the opportunities are there. The other issue when it comes down to the sex's business is the quality of decision making. Why are Apple more successful than Nokia? Because Nokia could have been where the iPhone is today, could have been where Blackberry could have been exactly the same. Management got complacent. Management weren't making the right decisions. And I know this probably sounds really twee and cliched in my observation. And I'm just a teacher. I look at the decision making. I look at the style of management at senior level at Manchester United, and I describe it as a digital company. Sorry, as an analog management team in a digital age. They just are so far behind the competition with regards to the way that the club's being run. I know as a United fan, you don't want to hear me talking about Liverpool and Manchester City. They're brilliant at what they do.
They're miles ahead. They're in a different universe currently to Man United. Completely different.
And therefore, you've got to ask why. And it comes down to the people at the top recruiting the right people below them, who recruit the right people below them, and so on. So, I was reading a story in one of the newspapers. The Manchester United coach, they lost 4-0 at Brentford on Saturday. The match kicked off at 5:30. The match finished at 7:30. They'll get back to Manchester at midnight. If I was a sports scientist, what I would say is, well, the last thing I'm going to do is to drag the players in on Sunday morning. They're not kids. They're not horses. They're not donkeys. They are supreme athletes. And anybody who knows about recovery time, again, I'm just a teacher. I just teach spreadsheet nonsense. But even I know that if I've run a marathon, I don't go out running the following day. So it just seems to be, this is old school. We need to punish the players. We're going to deny them a day off the day after the match because they lost. Well, football. Loads of football teams lose matches. You don't march them into training the following day. So it just overall to me looks like poor decision making, and ultimately that buck stops at the Glazers because the manager picks the team, the board of directors picks the manager, the board of directors chooses the directors of football. Who chooses the directors? It's the shareholders, and the shareholders of the Glazer family. So I think they have to take responsibility. There's an awful lot of ducking and diving being made, and lots of excuses. But it does come down to the quality of senior management. And that's not about Manchester United. That's in respect of all businesses. You cannot be successful if you've got people at the top making daft decisions.
I couldn't agree more. Every Man United fan will agree with that. I think that's a frustration, to be honest, Kieran, that they haven't brought in. They bring in the best of class in terms of commercial, but they haven't brought the best in class in terms of footballing and the hierarchy, director of football. That's a frustration. I'm really conscious of time here, so I've got one more point just to run by you. So, in the event that Man United don't qualify for the Champions League, which doesn't look like it'll happen this season, what happens to United's spending power? Because we always see that when United finish in the Champions League, they might spend a bit more because they've got a little bit more to spend. And then when they don't finish in the Champions League, you see that less gets spent. It's this horrible, vicious cycle. New manager comes in, does well, gets Champions League, doesn't get back, gets sacked. And it's just been happening now for the last decade, really.
I think the biggest concern from an observer, from an analytical point of view, is that if you go into the small print of Manchester United's accounts, it says, if the club fails to qualify for the Champions League in 2 consecutive years, then Adidas are entitled to reduce the amount that they pay by 25%. So that's the thick end of 20 million. So that's part of your budget gone. You've then got the fact that we've already had this discussion. The Champions League is probably worth, for a club of United stature, an additional 70 to 80 million. So we're £100 million down. Now, that £100 million has to, in decreased revenue, means that you've got effectively £100 million worth of decreased expenses opportunities as well. I appreciate that they will have caveats in terms of the wage bill, but it will impact upon the transfer budget. And they're not a club such as Chelsea or Manchester City, who have had owners who say, right, if the club's not making the money, here's a check. I'll fill that gap for you. And that's not saying that the Chelsea and Manchester City models are better or
just
worse.
Different ownership
they are different.
models, aren't
They're
they?
different.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Kieran. And last question before we wrap up. Based on you know the numbers, you see the financial landscape of what's going on with Manchester United. Do you think the Glazers are looking to sell, and do you expect them to be here in 2 years' time?
I don't think they're looking to sell per se, but there's an awful lot of rumours going around. Sometimes it's tire kickers. Manchester United will always be news, whether it's good news or bad news. They are always news. I don't think they are. They're certainly not interested in selling at today's market price. If somebody goes and blows them out of the water with an offer, then they'll have to consider it. But you know, who's going to put up 5 billion and then have to deal with Old Trafford and then have to deal with the issues in terms of the quality of the playing staff and the coaching staff, which appear to go hand in hand. So it's an expensive gamble, and you're up against some very, very smart opposition as well, both domestically and within the rest of Europe.
Thank you very much, Kieran, for joining us. Guys, make sure you give Kieran a follow. We'll put all his details below. Make sure you read his book as well, The Price of Football. I've read it. It's fantastic, Kieran. And it's thank you for giving all your insights today. It's really tough times for Man United fans, but I really, really appreciate that. Any last things you want to say? Anywhere we can find some more of your work?
Well, I am on Twitter at Kieran Maguire. I'm irritatingly in far too many newspaper columns these days. And I do a podcast called The Price of Football, which by all rights nobody should have to want to listen to, but yeah, we do quite well for ourselves with comedian Kevin Day, and Kevin's an absolutely brilliant presenter, so it's worth it just to listen to him.
Absolutely, guys. We'll put the link below so you can check that out. Thank you very much for listening. This is the United Masterclass, and we'll see you all next time.